Hi, this is Kent Darcie. I created a series of audio programs for Transworld Radio that address the basic challenges that adults with divorced parents face. And we decided to put this series on our YouTube channel. It's a series of 10 programs that cover basic issues like anger, anxiety, forgiveness, and other areas. But before you listen, I wanted to just cover a couple of basic things. First, this series was created for a men's ministry, so it's speaking to men. But the principles that we talk about apply to everybody. And second, it was created as an international program. It has been translated into a number of languages. So from time to time, you may hear a reference to something that's not American, but that's pretty rare. But I thought I'd give you a heads up on that. And lastly, there are a lot more resources for adults with divorced parents on our website, hopeforadp.com. I hope you'll find this series helpful and shareable. Take care.
I discovered that my parents' divorce was affecting me in significant ways. Also, there were millions of adults with divorced parents just like me. And these discoveries actually gave me hope that things could change. And they did.
In the United States, a marriage breaks up every 14 seconds. Divorce rates are high in many other countries as well. As a result, over 1 million kids a year become children with divorced parents. Are you an adult child of divorce? Is your spouse? Is your friend? Welcome to Champions Arise. I'm your host, Foster Braun. Divorce can be a touchy subject. Parents want to believe that their breakup didn't have a negative effect on the kids. The children grow up convinced that the impact of the divorce diminished over time. But are these beliefs actually true? Our guest today is Kent Darcie. He's the founder of Adult Children of Divorce Ministries. His ministry helps adults with divorced parents identify the areas where they're still being impacted by their parents' divorce. The ministry's purpose is to create awareness of these issues, provide resources that can help those from broken homes enjoy God-honoring relationships, and break the cycle of divorce. We'll hear Kent's story and look into this fascinating topic when we return. Kent, divorce directly or indirectly touches nearly everyone in our audience. Why does your ministry primarily focus on adults with divorced parents?
Well, the best way to answer that is to give you my background. My parents broke up when I was 13. Prior to their split, my life was pretty typical. I went to school, played games, and did normal kid stuff. After their divorce, things seemed normal, but in an abnormal sort of way. Those listeners with divorced parents know what I mean. But kids from divorced homes adapt, and I adapted. Life marched on with school, college, marriage, children. From the outside, I looked well-adjusted, happy, and successful. But what I didn't realize was that things were far from healthy on the inside. Anger, fear, and other issues had gained a foothold in me, and they affected how I responded to everyday situations. Consequently, I did a lot of damage to my relationships and my marriage. But God is merciful, even with thick-skulled people like me.
I think thick-skulled describes a lot of us. But what was the turning point?
Well, God used a marriage retreat to reveal what was really going on in me. During that weekend, the Lord startled me with a revelation that if I didn't change, I was heading toward divorce.
Wait a minute. You mean that your wife was going to file for divorce?
No. What I believe God was saying was that because I was stuffing or burying my emotions instead of dealing with them, I was slowly destroying the marriage. Basically, if things didn't change, it would get to the point where the marriage was either dead on the inside, a marriage in name only, or dead on the outside for all to see because we'd divorce.
That sounds scary.
Terrifying, actually. My purpose in life was not to divorce. I was stunned by what the Lord said because I thought I was doing everything I knew to avoid divorce. But God's message was clear, and I needed to find out why I was on a path headed for divorce. So with prayer and a lot of research, I discovered that my parents' divorce was affecting me in significant ways. Also, there were millions of adults with divorced parents just like me. And these discoveries actually gave me hope that things could change, and they did. And as an encouragement to our listeners, my wife and I renewed our marriage vows after 30 years.
Congratulations and praise God. That's fantastic.
The Lord has been very, very good to us, and He's given me a passion to share what I've learned with other adult children of divorce. 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 3 and 4 is my ministry's key verse and sums up my story. It says, "Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our affliction, so that we may be able to comfort those who are in any affliction, with the comfort with which we ourselves are comforted by God." I've received God's comfort, and He's called me to share His comfort with all those from broken homes.
What do you say to the listener who says that their parents' divorce was no big deal and that they're over it?
Well, I understand. For years, I believed the same thing, and they might be over it. However, I ignored warning signs. My wife tried to tell me that I was still angry about my parents' divorce. Back in high school, a teacher reached out to me, but I stubbornly refused to admit there was a problem. So first, I'd ask that listener, are you getting warnings from loved ones? Are they saying that there's a problem? Then I would share the reality of what's going on with that listener. The reality says adults with divorced parents are at least 50% more likely to get a divorce than those from unbroken home. When the husband and wife both come from divorced families, the odds of divorce are 200% higher. Pretending everything is okay and ignoring the warnings only hurts your loved ones and increases the chances of becoming a statistic. So I'd say listen, learn, and pray that God will speak to you about this. We thank God that you found us today. Hang in there. I think you'll find this series interesting and very encouraging.
So, what are some of the ways divorce impacts the kids?
Well, the first thing is children of divorce can have unresolved anger. Kids respond in a variety of ways to the divorce, but anger is a common factor. There are many reasons for the anger, but two we'll look at briefly are loss and blame. Divorce and feelings of loss are very closely connected. Home and familiar routines can change. Church attendance often stops or is erratic. You might lose access to friends and some family members. The losses keep building, and they seem unfair, and we get angry. And I need to point out something here. As children, we see things differently than adults. Kids have less experience and only a limited knowledge of the big picture. As a result, the anger we have now was likely formed from when we looked at the world as a child. Divorce is traumatic for adults, but it can be terrifying for a young person. Consequently, viewing these issues from the kid's perspective is critical to understanding problems like anger that we're experiencing now.
I never really thought about it that way.
Most people don't, including, ironically, adult children of divorce. We tend to look back with 20/20 hindsight and justify or rationalize the things that happened, which sounds like the proper way to handle things, but the anger doesn't go away, and it remains unresolved.
So the losses kids experience after a divorce can lead to anger.
Yes, and another cause is blame. We may blame the parent we think caused the divorce. And we might be totally wrong in our assessment of who's guilty, but our anger will be focused on them. For me, unfortunately, my mom was the target of my blame. We also feel angry when our parents blame each other. When digs, sarcastic jabs, or outright slander are hurled at a spouse, it hurts us. After all, that's our mom or dad they're talking about. They may not love them, but we still do. So we're angry, and what happened if we showed our anger? It probably wasn't received well. Our parents had too much emotional pain themselves to deal with it, or the adults didn't connect our misbehavior to our anger about the divorce. So we learned to bury our anger.
That's common with children going through their parents' divorce.
Well, a lot of us buried our anger and never consciously expressed it. But as adults, sooner or later, something will trigger that unresolved anger, and boom, our loved ones are caught in the firestorm of our anger. Or it comes out in addictions, adultery, or in other negative ways. And we're also big on blaming other things or people for our anger. Our wife, our kids, our boss, that crazy driver. But anger can have its roots in the divorce. And we'll look at this issue of anger in much greater detail later in this series.
I'm glad we're going to be coming back to this issue. I suspect anger touches the lives of many of the men listening to us. But what's another lingering effect from parental divorce?
Well, the fear of doom. When you have the fear of doom, you live your life with the expectation that things will go wrong at any time. It might be at the job where you're afraid of getting fired, even though there's no reason to feel that way. Maybe you're worried your wife is going to leave you, even though she's been totally faithful and devoted. The fear of doom is the constant state of waiting for the worst thing to happen. Now, the fear of doom often starts when the divorce is announced to the kids. Most divorces don't have a lot of screaming and yelling. So, from the child's viewpoint, there were no warning signs before they heard the words, "Your father and I are getting a divorce." This announcement is so traumatic that most of us never forget hearing it. But this trauma reprograms our brains to expect life to change catastrophically and unexpectedly.
But life does change unexpectedly and sometimes catastrophically.
Well, that's right. But adult children of divorce can carry this burden like a ball and chain. We rarely relax and carry anxiety with us all the time. And it's a real problem. But right now, we're just doing a brief overview of the issues. We'll look at this also in more detail later in the series. But moving to the next issue, another fear is the fear of abandonment. Suddenly, one of the parents is gone, and that can cause us to fear being abandoned. But also, there's a little voice that says, since Dad left,
Mom can leave too?
Exactly. And this fear of abandonment lurks beneath the surface, and one way it can reveal itself in adulthood is as a clingy or standoffish adult. The clingy person wants to know where their wife is at every moment. Now their demands they sound good, like they're cloaked and caring, but they're really rooted in a fear that their loved one will leave them. Now, the standoffish person has problems maintaining strong relationships. When a relationship starts to get serious, they break it off. Their excuse usually is along the lines of, it wasn't the right person. But the sad truth is, they would rather run than take the risk of being abandoned.
Is that why we see good people going from relationship to relationship?
Well, that's one reason. There can be a number of factors, but for adult children of divorce, this is definitely something to be aware of. And the last issue we'll cover in this session is connected to this, actually, and that's the fear of marriage. Adult children with divorced parents fear marriage, usually because they fear divorce. Here's an example of a conversation I had. One day, I was talking with a teenager who had divorced parents. The topic of marriage came up, and he declared, "I'm never going to get married." Well, that surprised me, so I asked, why? After some thought, he replied, "Well, maybe I'll get married, but I'll never have kids." Again, I asked, why? And his response grieved my heart. He said, "If the marriage doesn't work out, I would never want my kids to suffer what I went through."
That's so disheartening.
Yes. And because of the fear of marriage, he may not marry. Or he might live with his girlfriend instead. I mean, cohabitating is on the increase. But men need to choose the godly way, not the path that looks like it has the lowest risk.
We hope men will be encouraged with this series to learn about these issues and make godly choices.